The crystalline surface of Kepler 442b gleamed under its twin suns as the Galactic Coalition's 47th Survey Battalion descended through the thick atmosphere. Commander Zixtel's 4 eyes tracked the readings on his bioscanner, while his tentacles worked the ship's controls with practiced ease. Behind him, the mixed crew of Valdorians, Kethmori, and Zentaurians prepared their equipment for what should have been another routine archaeological survey. "Energy signatures are off the charts down there," reported Lieutenant Kexara, her scaled fingers dancing across the sensor array. The Valdorian's crest flared with excitement as new data streams flooded her console. "Whatever civilization built that structure, they had technology we've never encountered before." The structure in question rose from the planet's surface like a geometric nightmare, impossible angles that seemed to bend space itself, constructed from materials that absorbed light, while simultaneously reflecting it in patterns that hurt to look at directly. It had been discovered 3 cycles ago by a deep space probe, and every analysis since then had yielded more questions than answers. As their transport settled onto the landing platform that jutted from the structure's base, Zixtel couldn't shake the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong with this place. The air itself felt thick with tension, and his species' natural ability to sense electromagnetic fields was going haywire. Every instinct told him to order an immediate retreat. But the Coalition's orders were clear: investigate, catalog, and report. The survey team consisted of 12 specialists from across the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. Dr. Mordoon, a brilliant Kethmori archaeologist whose 6 arms could work multiple analysis tools simultaneously, led the scientific contingent. Chief Engineer Yarlos, a towering Zentaurian whose crystalline exoskeleton could interface directly with most known technologies, headed the technical team. Together, they represented the pinnacle of galactic knowledge and experience. The structure's entrance dilated open at their approach, responding to their presence in ways that defied explanation. Inside, bioluminescent panels provided an eerie blue-green illumination that seemed to pulse in rhythm with something none of them could identify. The corridors stretched in directions that the ship's scanners insisted shouldn't exist, creating a 3-dimensional maze that challenged their understanding of physics. "The architecture suggests a civilization at least 10,000 years more advanced than anything in our databases," Dr. Mordoon observed, her primary hands recording data while her secondary arms collected samples of the wall material. "The engineering principles alone could revolutionize our understanding of space-time manipulation." They had been exploring for 6 hours when Engineer Yarlos detected an anomalous energy concentration deeper within the structure. Following his readings, the team navigated through chambers filled with devices whose purposes remained utterly mysterious. Crystalline formations that hummed with power, geometric sculptures that seemed to move when observed peripherally, and walls covered in symbols that shifted and changed when photographed. The chamber they finally reached defied all their expectations. Perfectly circular, with a domed ceiling that displayed what appeared to be real-time images of distant galaxies, it contained a raised platform in its center. Upon this platform sat 50 stone tablets, each roughly 3 feet tall and 2 feet wide, arranged in a precise spiral pattern. "By the void's edge," whispered Lieutenant Kexara, her translator struggling with the expletive from her native tongue. "They're beautiful." The tablets were indeed magnificent. Carved from some unknown black stone that seemed to absorb light while maintaining perfect visibility, each one was covered in intricate symbols that appeared to have been etched with incredible precision. The symbols themselves defied classification, part pictographic, part geometric, part something entirely alien to galactic understanding. Dr. Mordoon approached the nearest tablet with scientific reverence, her instrument scanning every detail. "The craftsmanship is extraordinary," she reported. "The symbols are carved to a depth precision of exactly 2.7 millimeters across all 50 tablets. This level of consistency suggests automated production, but the artistic variations indicate conscious design choices. "Can you read any of it?" Commander Zixtel asked, though he suspected the answer. "Nothing matches any linguistic database in Coalition records," the archaeologist replied. "These symbols don't follow any known grammatical or structural patterns. It's as if they represent concepts our languages simply don't possess." Engineer Yarlos interfaced with the platform supporting the tablets, his crystalline appendages glowing as they made contact with the alien technology. "The platform is actively powered," he reported. "It's maintaining some kind of stasis field around the tablets. Whatever these things are, someone wanted them preserved for a very long time." Chief Science Officer Velthar, a Mendatian whose gaseous form allowed her to analyze atmospheric compositions in ways solid beings couldn't, detected trace elements in the air around the tablets. "There are particles here that shouldn't exist according to our periodic tables," she announced through her translation device. "The very atoms seem to be arranged in impossible configurations." As the hours passed, the team employed every analytical tool at their disposal. Quantum scanners, linguistic algorithms, historical databases, and even psionic probes all failed to make sense of the tablets. The symbols remained as mysterious as when they'd first been discovered, showing no correlation to any known writing system in the galaxy's vast archives. "It's almost like they're from outside our reality entirely," Dr. Morden mused as she completed her third full scan of tablet number 17. "The mathematical precision suggests intelligence, but the symbolic logic follows patterns our minds can't grasp." Commander Zixtel made the decision to carefully extract 3 of the tablets for transport back to the Coalition's best research facilities. Using the ship's industrial replicator, they created exact molecular copies while leaving the originals undisturbed. Even this process proved challenging, as the tablets seemed to resist scanning at the quantum level. As they prepared to depart, Lieutenant Kexara noticed something that sent chills through her scaled spine. "Commander," she called out, "the arrangement has changed." The team turned to look at the platform. Where before the 50 tablets had been arranged in a perfect spiral, they now formed a different pattern, one that somehow conveyed urgency despite being completely incomprehensible. The tablets hadn't moved. Their positions remained exactly the same, but the meaning their arrangement conveyed had shifted in a way that touched something primal in every observer's mind. "Did we do something to trigger this change?" Zixtel asked. Engineer Yarlos ran a full diagnostic. "No external interference detected. It's as if the tablets themselves decided to communicate something different." The implications were staggering. If the tablets could change their meaning spontaneously, they weren't just static records. They were active, intelligent artifacts with their own agenda. The realization that they might be dealing with technology that could think and adapt sent waves of unease through the entire survey team. Dr. Morden made detailed recordings of the new configuration, while her colleagues debated the implications. "This changes everything," she said. "We're not looking at historical artifacts. These are active communication devices of some kind." The return journey to Coalition space took 18 standard days, during which the copied tablets remained completely inert. Whatever intelligence or energy had animated the originals didn't transfer to the molecular duplicates, suggesting that the tablet's true nature lay beyond mere physical matter. Upon reaching Coalition Central Command on Nexus Prime, the tablets were immediately transferred to the galaxy's most advanced xenoarchaeological facility. Teams of specialists from dozens of species worked in shifts, applying every known analytical technique. Quantum archaeologists, temporal linguists, dimensional mathematicians, and even the galaxy's few remaining psychic sensitives all took their turns trying to unlock the tablet's secrets. Months passed without progress. The tablets remained as inscrutable as ever, their symbols defying every attempt at translation or interpretation. The Coalition's greatest minds admitted defeat one by one, unable to crack even the most basic elements of the alien language. It was during the 4th month of analysis that a junior researcher made an observation that would change everything. Dr. Thexandy, a young Altarian whose species possessed unique pattern recognition abilities, noticed something the others had missed. "The symbols aren't random," she announced during a research briefing. "They follow a specific mathematical progression, but it's not based on any numbering system we understand. It's almost like they're describing relationships between concepts that don't exist in our reality." Her supervisor, the renowned xenolinguist Professor Gulmas, studied her findings with growing excitement. "If you're correct, this could be the breakthrough we've been waiting for. Can you develop a translation matrix?" Dr. Thexandy worked for weeks, building complex algorithms that attempted to map the alien symbols onto known mathematical and linguistic frameworks. Her progress was slow but steady, until she encountered something that brought her work to a complete halt. "I can't continue," she announced to the research team, her voice trembling with an emotion her species rarely displayed. "The patterns I'm detecting, they're not describing abstract concepts. They're describing real places, real events, real threats." "What kind of threats?" Professor Gulmas asked. "The kind that could end civilizations," Dr. Thexandy replied. "The pattern suggests these tablets are warning about something specific to whatever species created them. But without understanding their creator's nature, I can't determine what they're warning against." The implications hung heavy in the research facility's sterile air. If the tablets were in the human research vessel, Endurance arrived at Nexus Prime with minimal fanfare, its simple fusion drives and basic hull plating marking it as clearly inferior to every other ship in the Coalition fleet. Dr. Sarah Chen, the team's lead xenoarchaeologist, stepped off the transport with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Behind her followed Dr. Marcus Webb, a military historian whose specialty in ancient warfare had earned him respect, even among human academic circles, and Dr. Kenji Nakamura, a linguist whose unconventional theories about communication had made him somewhat of an outsider in his field. The Coalition's research facility on Nexus Prime was a marvel of galactic engineering, crystalline walls that could display data in 4 dimensions, atmospheric controls that could accommodate 16 different species simultaneously, and analytical equipment that manipulated matter at the quantum level. To the humans, it felt like stepping into a science fiction dream. Professor Gulmas greeted them with the polite condescension typically reserved for less advanced species. "Dr. Chen, welcome to our facility. We've prepared a basic analysis station for your team's use. The tablet copies are available in Research Bay 7, along with all our accumulated data files." "We appreciate the opportunity," Sarah replied, her translator converting her words into the Galactic Standard Language. "We understand this is likely a long shot, but humans sometimes see patterns differently than other species." Dr. Thexandy, whose breakthrough had stalled weeks ago, joined the orientation session. Her natural curiosity about alien perspectives overcame her species' usual reserve. "Your analytical methods are quite different from ours," she observed. "I've studied human archaeological techniques. You place unusual emphasis on cultural context over pure data analysis." Marcus nodded. "We've learned that understanding the people behind artifacts is often more important than understanding the artifacts themselves. Technology tells you how something was made, but culture tells you why it was made." The human team spent their first day reviewing the accumulated research data. Months of work by the galaxy's finest minds had produced detailed analyses of every physical and quantum property of the tablets, but virtually no progress on their actual meaning. The symbols remained as mysterious as ever, their patterns defying every known linguistic framework. On their second day, Sarah and her colleagues finally stood before the tablet copies in Research Bay 7. The black stone artifacts sat under perfect preservation fields, their incomprehensible symbols seeming to shift in meaning depending on viewing angle and lighting conditions. "They're beautiful," Kenji murmured, pulling out a simple digital camera to take photographs. The Coalition researchers had used advanced quantum scanners and dimensional imagers, but the human linguist preferred to work with basic visual records that he could study without technological interference. Marcus approached the tablets with a different perspective entirely. Where the Galactic archaeologists had focused on the symbols themselves, the military historian examined the tablets' arrangement and presentation. "These weren't meant to be read quickly," he observed. "Look at how they're positioned. You have to move between them, study them in sequence. This is deliberate pacing, like a military briefing designed to ensure understanding." Sarah began photographing individual symbols, but also took wide shots showing multiple tablets in their arrangement. Something about the overall pattern nagged at her, triggering half-formed memories from her undergraduate studies. "Kenji, do these remind you of anything from human history?" The linguist studied the images for several minutes before responding. "There's something familiar about the structure, but I can't place it. The symbols are completely alien, but the way they're organized, it's almost like they're following narrative conventions." Dr. Thexandy watched the humans work with growing curiosity. Their methods seemed almost primitive compared to the Coalition's advanced analytical tools, but their approach was fundamentally different. Where Galactic researchers had focused on decoding the symbols as abstract information, the humans seemed to be treating them as intentional communication from real people. "Your species has extensive experience with undeciphered scripts?" she asked. "More than we'd like," Sarah replied with a rueful smile. "Human civilization has left behind hundreds of writing systems that we still can't read. We've learned to look for patterns that go beyond pure linguistics." Marcus had moved to examine the tablets from different angles, noting how the symbols appeared to change emphasis depending on viewing position. "This is definitely meant to be read in a specific sequence," he announced. "The visual flow guides you from tablet to tablet in a predetermined order." "The Coalition teams tried sequential analysis," Professor Gulmus interjected. "Multiple reading orders were tested without success." "But did they consider narrative structure?" Marcus asked. "These aren't data files. They're a story. Look at the symbol density variations, the way certain motifs repeat at specific intervals. This follows storytelling patterns." Kenji had been quietly studying the symbols through his camera's digital display when something clicked. "Sarah, Marcus, look at this through the camera." He handed them the device, showing the symbols as displayed on its simple LCD screen. What they saw made all three humans step back in shock. Through the digital display, stripped of the complex quantum effects and dimensional distortions that Coalition scanners registered, the symbols suddenly became familiar. Not readable, but familiar in a way that touched something deep in human racial memory. "Those are warning pictographs," Sarah whispered. "The style is completely alien, but the fundamental structure, we've seen this before." Marcus studied the images with growing excitement. Cave paintings, megalithic monuments, ancient warning markers. Every human civilization has created versions of these symbols. The breakthrough came when Kenji realized that the tablets weren't written in an alien language at all. They were written in the universal language of survival warnings that every intelligent species eventually developed. The specific symbols were alien, but their underlying logic followed patterns that humans had used for tens of thousands of years. "They're not describing abstract concepts," Sarah explained to the gathering Coalition researchers. "They're giving specific warnings about specific threats. This isn't literature or philosophy, it's a survival guide." Working with fevered intensity, the human team began mapping the alien symbols onto human warning archetypes. Symbols that the Coalition's computers had analyzed as mathematical abstractions suddenly revealed themselves as pictographic representations of dangers, locations, and survival strategies. This symbol here, Marcus pointed to a recurring motif, appears on 12 different tablets. In human warning systems, repetition like this indicates extreme danger, something so important it must be emphasized multiple times. Dr. Thexandi watched the humans work with growing amazement. Her own pattern recognition abilities, considered exceptional among galactic species, had completely missed the narrative structure that seemed obvious once the humans explained it. "Your species naturally thinks in terms of warnings and survival?" she asked. "Every day for the last 200,000 years, Sarah replied. "Humans have always lived in dangerous environments. We've had to develop very sophisticated ways of communicating threats to future generations." The translation process took 3 more days of intensive work. The humans approached each tablet not as an isolated puzzle, but as part of a larger warning system designed to save lives. They identified symbols for danger, time, location, and action, building a vocabulary of survival that transcended species boundaries. What they discovered chilled everyone in the research facility. The tablets told the story of a galaxy-wide catastrophe that the creator's civilization had barely survived. Something, the exact nature remained unclear, had emerged from the spaces between stars, consuming entire worlds and leaving nothing but lifeless husks behind. The creators had fought this threat for millennia before finally developing a defense, but the cost had been unimaginable. "They're not just warnings," Marcus realized as the full scope of the tablet's message became clear. "They're instructions. Everything on these tablets is designed to help other species recognize and defend against the same threat." The final tablets contained the most crucial information, detailed descriptions of the threat's behavior patterns, the signs of its approach, and the specific technologies needed to combat it. But they also contained something that made the human researchers' blood run cold. "According to this timeline," Kenji said, his voice barely steady, "the threat operates on a cyclic pattern. It returns to each galaxy every 50,000 years to harvest what has grown since its last visit." Sarah checked and rechecked her translation, hoping for an error. "The dates they give, if we're reading this correctly, the next return cycle begins soon. Very soon." "How soon?" Dr. Thexandi asked. Marcus looked up from his calculations, his face pale. "According to their calendar system, which seems based on galactic rotational periods, approximately 5 years from now." The implications crashed over the research facility like a wave of ice water. The tablets weren't just historical artifacts. They were an active warning system left by a civilization that had faced the same threat the current galaxy was about to encounter. The creators had survived their encounter, but only through preparation and sacrifice on an unimaginable scale. Professor Gulmus immediately contacted Coalition High Command, while the human team continued their translation work. Every symbol, every warning, every piece of tactical information could mean the difference between survival and extinction for billions of inhabited worlds. "There's more," Sarah announced as she completed her analysis of the final tablet. They left specific instructions for species like ours, younger civilizations that might not have the technology to defend themselves. But the defense requires cooperation on a level the galaxy has never achieved. The last tablet contained the most sobering message of all. The creators had survived their encounter with the threat, but their civilization had been reduced from billions of worlds to a handful of hidden refugees. They had spent their remaining years creating warning systems like these tablets, hoping that future civilizations might succeed where they had barely survived. "They're all dead," Marcus said quietly. "The civilization that created these tablets, they sacrificed everything to leave these warnings for us." Dr. Thexandi's pattern recognition abilities finally clicked with the human insights. "The changing arrangement we observed on the original tablets," she realized. "It wasn't random. They were responding to our presence, updating their warning based on current galactic conditions." The tablets weren't just static messages. They were intelligent warning systems that could adapt their information to changing circumstances. The creators had built them to recognize different species and modify their warnings accordingly. They had been waiting for 50,000 years for someone to find them and understand their message. As news of the human team's breakthrough spread through coalition channels, reactions varied from species to species. Some dismissed the warnings as ancient superstition, while others began immediate preparations for an unknown threat. The galaxy's political unity, already fragile, began to crack under the strain of deciding how to respond to warnings about something that might not even exist. But deep in the coalition's military planning centers, strategists who specialized in existential threats began taking the tablets very seriously indeed. If the warnings were accurate, the galaxy had less than 5 years to prepare for a threat that had destroyed civilizations far more advanced than anything currently existing. The human team's final report contained a recommendation that surprised everyone, including themselves. Rather than attempting to develop the advanced defensive technologies described in the tablets, they suggested focusing on something the creators had emphasized repeatedly: unity of purpose among all galactic civilizations. The emergency session of the Galactic Coalition Council convened on Nexus Prime, exactly 1 week after the human team's translation breakthrough. Representatives from 347 member species filled the vast amphitheater, their diverse forms creating a rainbow of biology and technology that would have been magnificent under other circumstances. Today, the atmosphere was heavy with tension and barely contained panic. Chancellor Vextar, the ancient Mendorian whose gaseous form rippled with stress patterns, called the session to order. Honored delegates, we face an unprecedented situation. The human team's translation of the ancient tablets presents us with information that could change everything we know about galactic history and our future survival. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the central podium, her small human form dwarfed by the massive assembly hall. The translation documents had been distributed to every delegation, but she had been asked to present the findings personally. The weight of 300 billion lives across the galaxy rested on her ability to convince these beings that an ancient warning was worth taking seriously. The tablets tell us that approximately 50,000 years ago, a civilization far more advanced than our own faced an existential threat from entities they called the Harvesters, Sarah began. These entities appear to follow predictable patterns, returning to each galaxy on 50,000-year cycles to collect resources and eliminate resistance. The Keth Mori delegation erupted in rapid-fire clicking sounds that their translators rendered as heated debate about the reliability of ancient sources. The Zentorian representative's crystalline form flashed in patterns that indicated deep skepticism, while the Valdorian council members' crests displayed colors associated with fear and uncertainty. Ambassador Thulgax of the Hegemony Coalition spoke first. Dr. Chen, with respect to your species' archaeological capabilities, you're asking us to restructure our entire galactic defense strategy based on symbols carved in stone by a dead civilization. Where is the corroborating evidence? The evidence is all around us, Marcus Webb replied, stepping up beside Sarah. Every archaeological survey of the galaxy's older regions shows the same pattern. Brilliant civilizations that simply vanished at exactly 50,000-year intervals. We always assumed it was natural disaster or war, but the pattern is too consistent. Dr. Kenji Nakamura activated the hall's holographic display system, showing a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy with historical data overlaid. Look at the extinction patterns. Advanced civilizations disappearing in waves that sweep across the galaxy over periods of decades, always leaving behind the same signatures: worlds stripped of resources, technology destroyed, but infrastructure left intact. The visual evidence was undeniable. The pattern that the tablets described matched archaeological data that had puzzled galactic historians for centuries. Civilizations that should have been able to survive almost any natural disaster had simply vanished, leaving behind only ruins and mystery. Representative Zordan of the Scientific Conclave raised his species' equivalent of a hand. Even accepting that this pattern exists, how do we know the threat is returning now? Your translation could be off by millennia. Sarah had dreaded this question because the answer was both compelling and terrifying. The tablets contain astronomical references that allow precise dating. They describe stellar configurations that we can calculate exactly. According to every model we've run, the next cycle begins in 4 years, 7 months, and 16 days. The hall erupted in chaos. 347 different species expressing shock, fear, and denial created a cacophony that overwhelmed the translation systems. Some delegates demanded immediate military preparation. Others insisted on further study, and still others began calculating how to evacuate their home systems. Chancellor Vextar's form flashed with the bioluminescent patterns that commanded attention from all present species. Order! We must maintain rational discourse. Dr. Chen, what exactly do the tablets tell us about this threat? The harvesters appear to be artificial entities of unknown origin, Sarah replied. They emerge from the spaces between galaxies, traveling through dimensions our current technology can't detect. They systematically strip worlds of specific resources, not just materials, but also biological and intellectual properties. Marcus activated another display showing the tactical information the humans had extracted from the tablets. They don't just destroy civilizations, they study them, harvest their knowledge and genetic material, then move on. The creators described them as perfect predators that adapt to whatever defenses they encounter. But the creators survived, pointed out Ambassador Krellnox, whose species specialized in military strategy. How? Unity, Kenji answered simply. Not just military cooperation, but complete integration of all civilizations in their galaxy. They shared every technology, every defensive strategy, every resource. No species held back anything that might contribute to survival. The implications hung over the assembly like a toxic cloud. The Galactic Coalition prided itself on cooperation, but true unity of the kind described in the tablets had never been achieved. Too many species maintained military secrets, technological advantages, and resource monopolies that they considered essential to their independence. Fleet Admiral Cortez, the Coalition's supreme military commander, stood to address the assembly. If we accept these warnings as accurate, we need to begin immediate preparations. Our current fleet strength is designed for conflicts between member species, not for fighting entities that destroyed civilizations more advanced than ours. What do the tablets recommend for defense? Asked the representative from the Outer Rim territories, whose sparse population made them particularly vulnerable to any galaxy-wide threat. Sarah consulted her translation notes, though she had memorized every relevant passage. The creators describe 3 types of defensive measures. First, early warning systems that can detect harvester scouts before they establish beachheads. Second, distributed manufacturing capabilities that can't be eliminated by destroying key worlds. Third, unified command structures that prevent the enemy from exploiting political divisions. The military implications were staggering. Every major fleet would need to be restructured, standardized, and placed under unified command. Manufacturing centers would need to be dispersed across thousands of worlds and protected by defensive systems that didn't yet exist. Most challenging of all, intelligence and technology sharing would need to be absolute and immediate. Dr. Thexandi, who had requested permission to address the assembly, rose to speak. The tablets contain detailed technical specifications for defensive technologies. However, building them requires resources and manufacturing capabilities that no single species possesses. This is not a problem that can be solved by any one civilization. The Altarian scientist activated a new display showing resource requirements for the defensive systems described in the tablets. The numbers were breathtaking. Materials that would require mining the cores of gas giants, energy outputs that would drain entire star systems, and manufacturing precision that pushed the boundaries of known physics. "We would need to convert our entire galactic civilization into a war machine," Admiral Cortez observed grimly. "Agriculture, manufacturing, research, everything subordinated to defense preparation." "The alternative is extinction," Marcus replied bluntly. "The tablets show what happened to civilizations that tried to maintain normal operations while defending against the harvesters. None of them survived." The debate that followed lasted for 3 days and nights. Some species argued for immediate mobilization, others demanded more proof, and still others suggested evacuation to nearby galaxies. The unity that the tablets insisted was essential seemed impossible to achieve among so many diverse civilizations. It was the youngest member of the assembly who finally cut through the political deadlock. Ambassador Te Nara of the recently contacted Salenthi spoke for the first time since joining the coalition. "Honored elders, we argue about proof and politics while time runs short. If the warnings are false, we will have built defenses and achieved unity that benefit everyone. If the warnings are true and we do nothing, we all die. The choice seems obvious." Her simple logic resonated across species boundaries in ways that complex arguments had failed to achieve. The risk of action was manageable. The risk of inaction was absolute. The final vote was closer than Sarah had hoped, but sufficient for action. By a margin of 203 to 144, the Galactic Coalition authorized the most ambitious undertaking in the galaxy's recorded history: complete reorganization of all member civilizations for defense against an unknown threat. The Terran Defense Initiative, as it came to be known, was placed under Joint Human Galactic Command in recognition of humanity's role in understanding the threat. Sarah found herself appointed as Chief Archaeological Advisor, while Marcus became Strategic Planning Coordinator. Kenji was tasked with establishing communication protocols that could function during the crisis conditions the tablets described. Within weeks of the vote, the galaxy began its transformation. Shipyards that had built pleasure craft retooled for warship construction. Research facilities abandoned commercial projects to focus on defensive technologies. Mining operations expanded to levels that strained planetary ecosystems across thousands of worlds. The technical challenges were immense, but they paled compared to the political difficulties. Species that had guarded their secrets for millennia were now required to share their most advanced technologies. Military commanders who had never worked together were forced to integrate their forces into unified defense fleets. Resource distribution systems that had evolved over thousands of years had to be rebuilt from scratch. The human team found themselves in the strange position of being galactic civilization's experts on a threat they knew almost nothing about. They spent their days consulting the tablets for every detail about harvester capabilities, tactics, and weaknesses, building a defense strategy based on the experiences of a civilization that had died 50,000 years ago. "The creators left us everything they could," Sarah observed during one of their daily planning sessions. "Technical specifications, tactical analyses, even psychological profiles of harvester behavior. But they couldn't leave us the one thing we need most: experience." "We'll have to learn fast," Marcus replied, studying fleet deployment plans that covered half the galaxy. "The tablet suggests that first contact will come through scouts probing our outer systems. We'll have maybe 6 months between first detection and full invasion." Dr. Thexandy, now a permanent member of their team, had been analyzing the pattern of preparations across Coalition space. "Integration is proceeding faster than projected among younger species," she reported. "Older civilizations are struggling with technology sharing, but they're adapting. we might actually achieve the unity the creators described. The transformation of galactic civilization continued at breakneck pace. Worlds that had known peace for thousands of years installed planetary defense systems. Trade routes that had carried luxury goods now carried military supplies and refugees from the most vulnerable systems. Children across the galaxy learned emergency protocols instead of traditional subjects. As the final year of preparation began, long-range sensors detected the first anomalous readings from the galactic edge. Energy signatures that matched no known natural phenomena were approaching from the intergalactic void, following exactly the paths the tablets had predicted. The harvesters were coming. Standing in the Coalition's new Strategic Command Center on Nexus Prime, Sarah watched as confirmation signals arrived from deep space monitoring stations. The ancient warning had been accurate down to the day. In less than 6 months, the galaxy would face its greatest test. "Ready or not," she murmured, looking out at the fleet formations that now filled the space around every major world. "We're about to find out if we learned enough from the past to survive the future." The tablets had given them knowledge, but knowledge alone wouldn't be enough. The real test would be whether the galaxy's diverse civilizations could fight as one against an enemy that had destroyed countless others. The next few months would determine whether the Galactic Coalition would join the ranks of extinct civilizations or become the first to successfully defend against the Harvesters. In research facilities across the galaxy, teams of scientists worked frantically to understand technologies they barely comprehended. In military academies, officers studied tactical manuals based on 50,000-year-old battles. In factories and shipyards, entire worlds had been converted to war production. The creators had left one final message in the tablet's conclusion, a message that the human team had shared with no one else. After their victory, the creators had detected signs that the Harvesters were adapting to their defensive strategies. Each cycle, the enemy returned stronger and more sophisticated than before. The galaxy's survival would depend not just on implementing the creators' strategies, but on improving them. The ancient warnings had bought them time and knowledge, but innovation and courage would determine whether that gift was enough. Time was running out. But for the first time in galactic history, 347 species were truly fighting as one. Whatever came from the darkness between the stars would face not scattered civilizations, but a united galaxy that had learned from the past and prepared for the worst. The Harvesters were coming, but this time they would find their prey ready for the hunt. "The threat succeeds by dividing and conquering," Sarah's report concluded. "The creators survived not because of superior technology, but because they managed to cooperate completely in their defense. Our diversity could be our greatest strength, but only if we can achieve the same level of unity." The tablet's message was clear. The galaxy's greatest test was approaching, and success would depend not on any single species' abilities, but on whether all species could work together as never before. The creators had left their final gift, knowledge of what was coming and how to survive it. Whether the current galaxy would prove worthy of that gift remained to be seen. Deed warnings, they represented the desperate final message of a civilization that had faced extinction. But warnings about what? And why had they been left in such an elaborate, nearly indestructible form? As news of Dr. Thexandy's partial breakthrough spread through Coalition channels, a request came from an unexpected source. The humans, newest members of the Galactic Coalition and considered by most species to be primitive and unremarkable, asked for permission to examine the tablets. The request was met with polite skepticism from the Coalition's scientific community. Humans had been part of galactic civilization for less than 50 years. Their technology was centuries behind the galactic standard, and their analytical capabilities were considered adequate at best. What could they possibly contribute to a mystery that had stumped the galaxy's finest minds? but the Coalition's charter mandated equal access to archaeological discoveries, and the human delegation had specifically requested only a brief examination. The decision was made to allow a small human research team to study the tablet copies for 1 week, more as a courtesy than with any expectation of results.